Everybody. Hope you're all having a good day, evening, afternoon. I'm going to be joined today by David Arell. He's having a few tech issues and is restarting his computer, so he should be with us in just a moment today. But I'm excited about this conversation, excited to sort of get out of politics and get out of First Amendment and all of the sort of crunchy things that are happening in our world and have a talk today that's going to be a little bit more about grounding into ourselves, about taking care of ourselves, about finding some practices that can actually be beneficial to all of us. Very much looking forward to this guy joining us.
Ta-da!
Oh, tech, such a joy, isn't it?
Always a learning experience. Always a learning experience.
Things all right? You need a minute there to sort of catch your breath? I like to do rolling starts anyway because lets people sort of come in a little bit late and join us.
Yeah, man. I'm just getting all my screens and whatever else I got going on here. I'm gonna move you down here so I'm not looking up and away, like Superman.
And a fun fact for you guys out there is that David and I have been friends for almost 40 years now. And I mean, we're old, but we're not that old.
It feels like it. It feels like it.
If I remember, we met in in an aisle of a drugstore called Happy Harry's way back in the day as stock boys.
Yeah, it's got like a CVS or Rite Aid. Yeah, there's a few funny anecdotes may or may not have transpired in and around that facility, and expanding outward to here. Here we are now,
And
separated by many miles, but brought together over a Zoom call and continued shared interest, shared passion. Our trajectories have varied individually, but if you click out a level, the overall journey has been remarkably synchronous and along the same vector.
yeah, it's been beautiful. We've spent far less time living in the same town than we have lived apart, and yet our friendship and connection has remained quite close, which is beautiful.
Yeah, man.
So, all right, so let's get the ball rolling here. So, welcome everyone to another episode of Integral Edge, hosted by Integral Life. My name is Keith Martin Smith, and I am the author most recently of When the Buddha Needs Therapy. I've completed another book with my co-authors Daniel Ellensberg and Fred Rabinowitz called Strength with Heart. And we've just got an agent for that book, and we're going to be offering a course through Spirit Rock in the fall of 26. And this is really going to be a book for men and 9 guideposts that can help men find greater clarity and purpose, love, connection, all these things which are sort of lacking in some ways for the masculine in today's world. So I'm very excited about that. And I work as a developmental writing coach and as a leadership coach. And I'm very happy to welcome today my very good friend, David Arell. And David also works as a leadership coach and as a coach, and he's been doing that for a few years now. And David, maybe just tell everyone just briefly a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Keith, and congratulations on your book. Definitely looking forward to seeing that come out and blossom into its well-deserved fullness. So keep me posted on that. Yes, leadership development's been a long time passion of mine, as has adult developmental theory. I've had opportunities in different capacities to try to figure out what does that look like from an entrepreneurial standpoint. Over 20 years ago, how to build a company that Robert Keegan now calls a developmentally dedicated organization. What does it look like to lead from the front? What does it look like to lead from the side? What does it look like to lead from the back? And what does it look like to lead in overall and all in and across all those different contexts and relationships? And that's kind of where my passion and my purpose and my business work all continue to still intersect and weave and give me different challenges every day to be a better leader, to help those around me lead better as well.
Great. So let's get into it. So, why don't you set us up for sort of what you would like to talk about today, and let's just jump right into it.
Excellent. I prepared a 97-page PowerPoint.
You're gonna read us the thesis just directly, so you don't screw anything up.
We're going to go full Hegelian. We're going to actually read all the thesis and the antithesis, and then in hour 7, we'll get to the synthesis. No, I thought we'd do something different, Keith. You know, the last couple of times we've been on the show, I've had some different PowerPoints and, you know, more didactic plans to sort of lay out a more complex and complete model first and then chat. Today, I feel more inspired to kind of offer a broad brush portrait, which I'll try to get through in 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes here.
Great.
And then based on your interest and engagement, we can double click down from the portrait level into the pixel level and start to play with some of the different ideas that come up live. So I have again, my portrait idea here, but I have no idea which pixels are going to come up and what color they're going to be once we sort of start to play and turn with them. So as we shared in your awesome intro that went out via the email, what are we doing today? We're going to talk about attunement goals in the context of today's attainment culture.
Great.
So the biggest broad brush first lines we're going to look at is, what does the modern culture offer us? What are the values there? What is the value still to be found by leaning into some of the mindsets and factors and propositions that modernity has offered us, and how do we continue to leverage the strengths available? How are we seeing those manifest in all the downsides? How are we seeing postmodernism equally manifest downsides differentially, but still in relation to modernity? A double click would be, postmodern is not postmodern in any kind of scale that modern is different than and has grown out of traditionalism. There needs to be something with its own name that's just as far from modernity, with rockets and computers, as far as away from traditionalism with horses and plows. And we're not there. We're not even close to there. So there's an emergent next. That's the third thing in the sequence. So modernity and postmodernity still have some similar challenges. We're going to look how to get away from playing the game of attainment, which is what we see in modernity. And we're going to get into the game of attunement. Attainment is all about more. One of the little funny things I discovered is that there's a part of speech called a determiner, which is what more is, and it's entirely quantitative. Whereas our attunement goals, as we'll discover, are qualitative. It's a whole different framework, a different game we're going to be playing.
And this is a transcend and include, is what you're saying. So the attainment would include this sort of achievement-oriented mindset.
Yes, yeah, the achievement-oriented mindset manifests most obviously in attainment. You're trying to stack stuff. You're trying to stack your status. You want your like, click, and subscribe below. All that sort of like influencer culture. And then, if we can click into for a second here, some of the postmodern or critiques of that, especially for people who can't win at the accumulation game, is to simply opt out or claim that their status, that they can't earn it. They'll assume it and they'll take it by playing the victim games. They'll go for the grievance culture of, like, by virtue of my position here given to me, I now claim sort of status by my lack of status, according to the modern culture. So it's still, there's no dignity there. And that's going to be the main, in either game, there's no dignity.
Boy, I really like that word, because I feel like if there's one thing that's missing in our culture today is this very idea of dignity. And my friend Rosalind Weissman, she's been speaking about this for quite a while now. She's really eloquent. And she talks about the difference between respect and dignity. That respect is earned. The idea of telling kids, like, you should respect each other, they know is BS, because it's like, well, I don't respect Jimmy, because he's a jerk.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
saying that, like, well, maybe you don't respect Jimmy, but Jimmy's worthy of a certain level of dignity.
Exactly. And that's the first big distinction we're going to get to here, is it's separating the attainment culture from a dignity culture. And dignity culture does exactly what you just did there. We're recentering our shared humanity as the common ground, from which, through our pursuit of attunement goals, that can take us to a higher ground. So many of the so-called culture wars are tribe A, group A, political party A, demanding that people agree with them. And that's where the common ground. I am standing on the common ground and you need to move over here. And I will ask you to cooperate, or I will coerce you with any number of degrees of threats and force, etc. So that's where there is no common ground to be found when playing that game. But through the gift of dignity, where you assume and grant the other person fundamentally equal rights, equal value as a baseline, that's where you can start to really lean into the attunement goals. And an option to click into later would be to compare how dignity culture compares to the shame and honor culture, and how some of the postmodern progressives have kind of dug into the reverse shame and honor culture. There's some little funny places we can go there, but that we'll re-click out to the portrait mode here. So from the dignity culture framework, now we get into the opportunity to be a better person, qualitatively speaking, not just because I have more stuff or I was born into a wealthy family and therefore I'm awesome automatically. I am aristocratic, you're not, so piss off, you know? What can we do? We can't earn honor, which you can do in a shame and honor culture through your individual acts, but we can attune to these dimensions of betterness. What does it mean to be a better person? And there's 3 dimensions we can play into today. The first dimension, if we're going to use a temporal framework, will be orienting to the past, and we'll uncover the framework of health. What does it mean to recover from a previous injury or trauma or unsophisticated early life lesson? Reactive tendencies will be a place we can explore there. What does it mean to be reacting? When I'm triggered by something, I'm bringing historical baggage with me into this moment and responding from that versus what's actually happening in front of me. So we can look at this past dimension. How to be a better person is to recover some of that energy that's locked into these previous identities. We can get in internal family systems. Different parts have different agendas and different energies. Trauma, somatic approaches. There's all kinds of places we can go, but all of those are oriented back towards past framework. From a future framework, you have the developmental opportunities. What does it mean to grow developmentally speaking? What's in front of us temporally is our higher potential. And again, something we can get into towards the end is how adult developmental theory is the engine that drives all these things, but it's most present and prescient here when we start looking at what does it mean to grow into becoming a better future and better person in the future. The third dimension is the present. What does it mean to be a better person here, now, through the present? And through this one, we're going to get into the concept of character, of depth, of virtue cultivation. And this is where so many of the spiritual traditions have so much to offer us, and their various practices, their learnings, their teachings, and their ultimately how to really bring forth those fruits of the spirit that are common across these spiritual traditions. And then just to wrap up here on the portrait, once we've kind of played with some of these dimensions of opportunity for attunement, now the question is, how do we create alignment in our actions through our pursuit of these attunement goals in these different dimensions, so that ultimately speaking, again, getting back to the engine of adult developmental theory, how can we harness our motivational drivers most active at each level and link them productively into a larger value system, i.e. culture, so that we are becoming a better person and we're having a constructive, positive impact on those people around us, and on the larger environment around us? And how are we connecting and networking with other people who are also on their own version of that quest for meaning rather than quest for conquest? And what does that look like? So when we get from attunement to alignment, and what does that look like moving forward, then we can really get into some interesting pixels at that part of the conversation as well. So I think I'll stop there. That's my portrait of what lies in front of us here today.
Great. But let's just go into the territory.
Yeah, man. Where would you like to click in?
Well, I mean, so there's a lot here, attainment culture, attunement culture, the idea of dignity. You really caught my attention with this idea of recovering past energies. I do a lot of work with trauma and
Yeah.
a lot of awareness of trauma and emotional intelligence and how all these past wounded selves live in the present and then create all kinds of problems for us in the present and into the future. So that's really interesting. I like this idea of moving, and being aware of our higher potential. And then how the present is about character and depth. So I would say, maybe why don't we sort of define broadly the attainment culture and the attunement culture, and from there I'm just going to let you run with it, and I'll just let my curiosity go where it wants to go.
Sure. And obviously, Keith, feel free to interrupt me at any time
I
because,
will.
as you know, don't just say, go ahead, David. 'cause I'll just start talking and 30 minutes go by. I'm like, oh, wait, should I have paused back there? Yeah. So we opened up with the first brushstrokes on modernity, and some of the things that I look at as the focus of modernity is on rationality, on individualism, and on autonomy. And these are all in context clear wins. You can think about the ground from which they emerged, very rigid social structures. If you're born a peasant, then too bad for you. If you're born into an aristocratic class or a caste system, wherever you are, that's just kind of where you are. There is no mobility upward anyway. There's no freedom. You're kind of governed by these irrational systems that don't have any basis, and any sort of critical inquiry gets met by being smashed, smited, or otherwise ostracized, or head on a stick or on a burning pyre. So, not really a great place to be.
And that's one of the great movements, the American experiment, a couple hundred years ago. One of the great movements there was moving from this idea of everything being defined by the collective to this novel idea of individuality and individual rights and individual agency that's allowed to express itself against that monolithic, unconscious cultural block, right?
Exactly. And you did such a great job of that, unpacking the founding fathers and the Constitution a little bit back, where this is exactly what you were speaking to. That's the value here that should not be missed, negated, or otherwise diminished.
Right. And when it sounds like what we're saying, we moved from this monolithic block to an individual emphasis, and now this attunement culture is moving back to a collective.
It preserves the healthy focus on individuality, rationality, and autonomy, but it moves away from over-indexing on it, and it recovers the value of having strong roots in some of the wisdom found through traditions. Hence, the spiritual traditions share this appreciation of fruits of the spirit and the 9 virtues that can be cultivated by intentionally orienting to those. And so when I say over-indexing, modernity sprung out of a very rich soil. And soil, as any farmer will tell you, is a good thing. It's necessary. It's helpful. With no soil, you can't grow anything. Whereas so many modern people, soil is not soil, it's dirt, and it's bad. And we don't want it. We want to sanitize the shit out of our houses until we're all dying on our own microbes because we don't have a functional immune system. So
right. Well, we have all sorts of autoimmune disorders, right? I just read a thing just as a sidebar where the Amish have almost no incidence of autoimmune disorders because they're basically, they're surrounded by quote unquote dirt all the time.
AKA the real world. Bananas. There's so many interesting rabbit holes we can go down there in the Amish and their life choices and their clearly healthier outcomes when looked at as a population. But we want to stay above ground here and avoid the rabbit holes. So when we over-index on modernity, and we're actually going to give us a pass on over-indexing on rationality. I don't know really anybody who I can think of who is over-indexing on rationality, especially in our larger cultural framework here, but definitely over-indexing on individualism and autonomy. And what we find there is the individual then becomes the highest authority. I will do what I want, and I will tolerate you in my world to the degree you don't challenge that. And what happens there is 98% we have a pre-trans fallacy miss where we're elevating narcissistic, adolescent, spiritually, mentally, emotionally immature perspectives and assuming that's who should be in charge of our lives. You know, all of us imagine ourselves to be the sole authority to the degree that we've over-indexed on the modernity, individualism, and autonomy. And what that leads to is all kinds of solipsistic nihilism. It leads to hedonism, this whole identitarian tribal activation and activism.
And wouldn't it also wouldn't that also explain the phenomena of, corporations being in our culture extensions of the individual with individual rights? Ergo, the corporations act as a selfish individual, the same way that, right? I mean, isn't that sort of
Yeah,
the same thing you're saying?
exactly. I mean, there's definitely a lot of as above, so below
Yeah.
sort of, resonance here, a kind of a Mandelbrot set of fractal reality echoing here. And where you end up with that, and to your corporations, they want all the rights, but none of the responsibilities.
Right.
That sounds like every
Which is what most of
adolescent
us
I
want
know.
too, right? It's
Yeah.
like I want all the rights, but no, I don't want to actually I don't want to be a part of the town
Consequences.
council. That's work, and I work for free. Who wants to do that?
Consequences, accountability. I'll believe a corporation is a person when I see one go to jail and have its rights stripped from it.
Right.
So then I'll believe it. But all those things lead to what we see everywhere. Some these different versions of narcissism. We have your overt narcissist, the me types. We have the covert narcissist. Oh, they're such a martyr. They're always willing to tell you how much they've suffered or how much they volunteered and putting everybody else first. And then we have the communal narcissist, as one of your previous guests, Bert Parley, started to get into a little bit there, of what is this sort of like collective narcissism of we're the good people because we've been marginalized, as if you get moral status based on your social status without actually ever doing anything, which again, all of that focus, none of that's on actually developing character and being a good person, healing your own wounds and traumas, or trying to grow and develop into a better person going forward. So you don't see any of that in this modern culture through more and the quantitative or this sort of like collapse into, lower order selfishness. So I'll pause there.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe just a brief walk through, politics and culture are very heated right now. So
No, you don't say.
of course, I just said this is going to be a great talk. We're not going to get into politics and culture. So here we go. Sorry about that, everybody. But maybe just a brief laying it across a little bit of kind of what you're seeing, with this sort of, and the crazy thing with the political things going on is that it's so not just an American phenomenon. I mean, this really is becoming a worldwide phenomenon, at least in the industrialized countries.
Yeah, I mean, do you have 6 hours for this little sidebar?
I mean, what would be like just a short, just a short kind of overview, just to give it a couple of headlines,
Yeah, what I've seen essentially is a devolution into tribalism and all of its ugly forms and at all of its levels of power, which is very concerning. Even as Americans, there's not a lot of people that I can call up who will say they're first and foremost an American, and then they can maybe talk about a party preference, or then they can talk about a particular platform or planks that they're pro or con, and not have it become a party collapse. Politics is, rather than being the art of compromise, has turned into a petulant toddler warfare of, the parties are taking turns holding the stick and then hitting each other on the head with it. And there's just all kinds of things that are not constructive. And unfortunately, we'll see this, I'm sure you've seen this echo throughout your life as well. A lot of our friends, neighbors, relatives are polarizing into these different, tribal camps that may or may not be affiliated with a particular political party, but these different narrative silos of belief systems.
Yeah.
And becoming increasingly immune or unable simply to entertain an alternative thought without feeling like there's some sort of risk in play.
Yeah.
Or attack.
Well, I mean, in the talk I did recently, there's that alarming statistic that FIRE put out, the Foundation for Individual. I actually forget exactly what it stands for, but what does FIRE stand for?
Foundation for Individual Rights.
and expression or something like that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But
Yeah, I get Fire and Fair mixed up in my head. Both of
but
which are
that,
great for all your listeners. Go join Fire and Fair if you're at least bit interested in being oriented to principles over party.
principles are part. But they very briefly they did this huge survey of a ton of colleges and tens of thousands of students, and they found that 3/4 of the students they surveyed believed that it was okay to shout someone down that you disagree with, and 34% believed that it was okay to be violent against people whose idea you disagreed with, which is just, I mean, that's the first statistic: 3/4 to shout down ideas you don't like, and a third to be violent against ideas you don't like. I mean, that's unprecedented, and that's the majority of young people in universities right now. That's pointing really very much to what you're talking about here. To me, it's like a glaring boil on the surface of our culture.
Absolutely, and you're pointing right to one of the big challenges that lay in front of everybody when it comes to cultivating depth and virtue. If you use a metaphor of a ship, which we'll get into in a little bit, and I want to give our colleague David Zeitler credit for the ship metaphor because it's super useful and sort of grounding some of these abstract concepts into a more readily grokkable singular thing, getting back to our hyperobject conversation but before. But the ship, what kind of weather can your ship withstand without getting chaotically violent? And so many people, because they haven't been encouraged by the culture they grow up in, it's not your fault if you're 15 and you think you should be shouting down or attacking people you don't agree with. It's the culture's fault. It's your parents' fault. It's the various organizations you've grown up within who haven't cultivated a desire and practices for you to develop tolerance for hearing things you don't like.
And for the dignity of the other person.
And the dignity of yourself. Like if you're acting like a petulant child shouting at people simply because you disagree with them, you're not really embodying a lot of dignity. That's not a very dignified response, no matter how you slice it. So, so there's our culture has regressed in maturity along any dimension that I can think of: emotional maturity, spiritual maturity, cognitive maturity, any kind of behavioral maturity. The larger cultures here and abroad, in many places, have clearly regressed to these more adolescent type behaviors and less mature adult behaviors.
Yeah.
That's my answer to the political part.
Great. Okay. Wonderful. So thank you for going down there. Again, just
Yeah, so I'm going to keep going to the because I really want to spend some time on the health, depth, and growth dimensions, because that's where I feel that's where the rubber meets the road. So
Great.
Getting back to attunement, dignity, culture, and attunement, we've already discussed asserting as a given the dignity of yourself and the other people, and that is the common ground from which you can build your own ladder upwards into that higher ground of being a better person, having healthier present framework from which to operate in the world, having a deeper grounding character so you can tolerate the winds of emotional energies arising within you, but also the effect of external stimuli upon you that maybe aren't what you want. Maybe your cheeseburger came with ketchup and you wanted no ketchup. How are you going to handle that? Maybe you're sitting next to somebody who's wearing a hat that you don't like. How are you going to handle that? Or what should you handle? Can you just eat your own burger? Worry about yourself. What does that look like to orient in the way in the world where you're able to be simply present with disturbances of any kind? And then how do you become a better person, especially now that, again, we're bringing the lens of adult developmental theory into play? How can that help you appreciate what does it mean to be a better person by growing developmentally? So that's where the locus of interest can shift from accumulation in the outside world and orienting to these attractors to refocusing on the inner world and being more concerned about being a better person rather than trying to change the world or go agitate for this, that, or some other cause. I mean, please do that and do it from a place of being a better person, so you do it more skillfully, more effectively, and more likely to have positive change in you and in the world around you. So again, the question here that we started with is, what does it mean to be a better person? And so as I touched upon in the portrait, the first pass over, we're going to run another pass of the printer at a finer level of granularity here. We talked about health, and Keith, we can dig into this one for a little bit. I mean, we're still early in the show. I'll cover a couple topics that fall under the health umbrella, and then we'll see if any of them really speak to you to kind of unpack. So, the biggest challenge for when we are looking to be curious about what of our past is more active today than it should be, one of the first places that we need to be mindful of is that the biggest challenge for that is just our general lack of awareness. We don't know what we don't know. And so the place to start to look to where some models call them your reactive tendencies. How do you sort of like, what are your knee-jerk responses to various provocations? There's three main, some different theories have organized these into three camps. You have your complying, you have your controlling, and you have your critical. And Karen Horney, a famous psychologist, organized these as are you moving towards, are you trying to friend that dynamic? When you feel triggered, do you try to seek safety by connection? Do you try to control? Or do you just avoid and become more critical? And you see this in attachment styles. You see this in different, IFS work.
Sure. Kind of like the fight, flight, freeze kind of, thing, or fawn.
Yeah, exactly. Those are the same. We're talking about the same three general stances of how do we orient to when we're being challenged. So that's one place to look. Where are you reactive? What are you reacting against? And what's your reactive style? Because that can indicate that's going to be a route for you that can lead to some of these energetic blockages. If we switch metaphors into a somatic angle, you're basically giving your psyche a massage, and you're looking for those little tender points. And where am I a little tender? Where am I reactive? Where am I triggered? Where am I bringing unsophisticated early life lessons learned and operating from that learning versus what's real and pleasant in front of me? So if you look at, we're going to click back out again. If we're looking at from the adult developmental theory lens, where we are developmentally speaking at any given time is sort of shaped like an amoeba, and that we're not a dot. We sort of operate in this sort of field of probability, and our leading edges, that's where we're kind of like operating on our best self during our best days. And our lagging edges are kind of like how we tend to show up, in our less great days when we're under-resourced, we're kind of tired and hungry and cranky. What does that look like? So I'm speaking here to lagging edges, but more importantly, I'm speaking to what, getting to that ship metaphor again, what we call those developmental anchors. Where is there something that's like anchored in, and the line is taut, and my growth is inhibited by this developmental anchor, and my ability to function cleanly, clearly, and optimally in the present is limited by the tension of this anchor.
Sure.
And every time I pull on it, it hooks, there's a contraction, and I tend to shrink back to where that anchor point is, and I operate from that thing there. So that would be
right. And let's just like to bring this home, because that's so abstract. It's like this is what all good relationship therapy is about, right? We get hooked. A lagging edge gets hooked, and then we do things like we criticize, or we stonewall, or we become contemptuous, or we get defensive, or all these things which are just absolutely toxic for a relationship. Whether that relationship is between me, the CEO, and my COO, or between me and my wife, or me and my kids, right? So it's like these things happen to all of us all the time.
All the
fucking time, right? And it's like, and if you don't think it happens to you, it's happening to you more than it is to most of us.
Yeah, ask your partner.
And that's but that's why, like, the leadership work that you do and the leadership work that I do, and that these things that are going into trying to grow up people that are running the world is a big part of this work. Because if we can bring this awareness of these lagging edges, of these traumas, of these shadows, of these triggers, development aside, it's like what it allows is for us to just be aware that we have reactive parts that come online that are essentially outside of our conscious control that tend to make things worse.
Absolutely. And all the time, and, I've been recently joined up with the Stagen Leadership Academy, and one of the most powerful practices they have here, because as you said, this is for all leaders. So what we do in the Stagen program is we use the empowerment dynamic and the drama triangle. When are we operating from a victim mindset? When are we operating from a persecutor mindset? When are we operating from a rescuer mindset? And and we do this to ourselves. Like the other day, I pulled out my freezer drawer and there were some popsicles that kind of melted, and the kids had a cup of water they sat in there that spilled. So I was like a frozen puddle of ice. And we got like 20 of these different like freezer packs, and it was a shit show. And I'm like, and I'm like activated, and I'm like, God dang it. And I'm in there, and I rage cleaned out the freezer. And I'm like, in my head, I'm a victim of this happened to me. I can't believe they did that. And now I'm persecuting them. And now I'm rescuing them and my wife. I'll clean it up before everybody gets home. So when they get home, I can show them how I clean the freezer. And like, none of that is me operating for my best self, right? Well, let's hope that's not my best self way of showing up in the world. I'm going to assert it's not, but I am open to being challenged on that. That actually is pretty good for me.
We'll get your wife to call in. We'll
Exactly.
get the real number.
Exactly. I'm sure she would have some interesting color commentary to add to that one.
One thing I always like to say to people when they have spiritual teachers and they're this and they're that and they're so wonderful and they're so awakened, and I hear this a lot in the circles I travel in, and it's like, well, sure. And you should spend some time with their spouse, and you should spend some time with like, not just their senior students, but the students that actually are at the very bottom. And you might find that they're not quite as awakened as your projection because they're humans, right? Maybe very deep spiritual insight. And, as the cliche goes, they got to put their pants on one leg at a time, just like me.
Well, I always thought that how full their hat was of random artifacts was how cool they were. They have Quetzalcoatl feathers and stones. And there's a whole Instagram parody of this person like a hat that was like 5 feet wide with like a hovering guru. And there was like
the
hat
Pope's got that big hat, That's
yeah, well,
funny, right?
that's my favorite. That's one of my favorite indicators. We're going on a sidebar here, but like if any kind of like third order social system is like how big are the hats of the leaders? Like whether it's a Korean. The North Korean army or the Pope or even the Tibetan lamas, and their hats are like 7 feet tall. It's like, oh, I know what's going on here.
I know who's got the power. It's clear. Yeah. The guy in the big hat's got the power.
Yeah, you look at mustaches and hats are a great indicator of any sort of adventure you're on. To see kind of how social status is determined.
You'll notice my hair is getting higher. That's actually the goal here. Is
to just I lost that game a long time ago. I just got to get bigger.
I'm going to look like Tom Waits in another 6 months.
Yeah, I'm going to see you just grow it straight up, like full on like Viking Mohawk mode. Yeah, so I'll pause there on health, and I'm happy to switch over to growth here, unless you want to dive into the more of the intricacies of health here for a minute. It's up to you.
No, so a guy named David in the chat made a good point, which is he thought that with the corporation as individuals that we did a poor job of differentiating what healthy orange versus red versus amber might be. So I want to note his comment and come back to that, but I think we'll just kick that down towards, because I want to hear you get through this depth and this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that we can definitely, as time allows, get to that towards the end where we're really bringing the adult developmental theory lens into play.
And what? And the like,
yeah.
All right. So
we can bring for sure, because his insight there is spot on. It's red masquerading as orange, so it can do its red, greedy, selfishness stuff without the healthy constructs on top of it that come from, blue social programs and structures. That's my quick answer. We'll circle back. So, so growth, again, orienting to the future, as we mentioned, using the amoeba metaphor, these are your leading edges. This is where you're sort of like in your best day when you're really sort of feeling in a flow and you're actively curious about what's next. You're actively, you're willing to take that little extra felt risk. You're able to tolerate a little more internal dissonance between like a previous belief system and maybe the new evidence in front of you. You're like, oh, that's interesting, versus just denying it or denigrating it or saying it was swamp gas or whatever your excuse du jour may be to dismiss what's right in front of your eyeballs.
Right. And from a developmental perspective, like if you're going from, amber to umber, it might be that thing of like you go from really wanting to be identified, from being identified as part of the group to beginning to think like, I wonder who I am outside of this group. And that question begins sort of that developmental growth edge of an inquiry of like, well, if I'm I'm Mormon, but who am I outside of that faith? I'm sort of curious, right? And that's that sort of nascent developmental bubbly edge that people are beginning to lean into as one
Yeah.
example, right? I mean, obviously each developmental level has its own version of that,
Yeah.
cognitively and emotionally.
Yeah, exactly. I think every developmental level has an appropriate sense of self
Yeah.
and an appropriate sense of authentic expression of that self. A lot of times people talk about their authenticity as if it's different than what they were before, where I would say you were authentically yourself and your self has continued to grow and evolve, and it's now outside the container that previously was its safe margin. And now there's that sort of felt risk of being bigger than your previous container. And when you're curious about what does that mean, that's a different stance. We can get into stance versus dance a little bit later, but that's a different stance than being fearful and trying to, put the toothpaste back in the tube because you feel like you're stepping outside a boundary that has risk and fear triggered by extending beyond boundary, responding out of fear and risk. Or are you responding out of curiosity and exploration? Again, that's the stance dance dynamic that we can get into.
Just briefly, it's like, I mean, I do love when people, the work that I do, a lot of people use the word authentic. And, I always have to point out that, what do you mean by that word? Right? Because it's like, a bunch of fundamentalist Christians are being completely authentic in what they're doing. It's like,
As are fundamentalist, Muslim, Jewish, anybody. Like
exactly. So it's like,
fundamentalism
but what they usually mean is some version of sort of green level postmodern authenticity, transcend, blah blah blah. But that's it's.
What they think they mean.
I always use it as a mark to stop a client
Yeah.
and just say like, would you please define what authentic means to you? And people kind of go like, because it's one of those words they use, but they've actually never self-defined because it's largely a projection of their meaning making onto the world. So authentic for them is what authentic is for everybody else.
Right. And authenticity is not a cognitive appraisal. It's a felt sense.
It's the gut check, right?
Yeah, exactly. So what's their emergent authenticity? How is that perhaps different than their previous one, and or how is it similar? Like, when we get into an individual client situation, these are the questions where they're like partially confused and they're partially confirmed. And now they're more curious. And again, where are they looking? They're looking internally. They are introspecting in that moment. Where is my authenticity? Where am I feeling it? And how is it different? And what's the same? That's exactly the attunement dimension that we're speaking to here. That's why this work is so important,
Okay. So I keep taking you off topic, but I think you're going into growth. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was getting to growth. I was talking about these leading edges of growth. And much like the growth amoeba has its leading edges and its lagging edges, and then beyond the lagging edges are those developmental anchors that are kind of holding them back. In growth, we have beyond our leading edges, we have sort of our aspirational grappling hooks. We're kind of like trying to throw something in there and get some traction.
Can you give me an example just to make that less abstract?
Yeah. So keeping with the developmental anchors, are unconscious and reactive. Our aspirational grappling hooks are conscious and active. So you're gonna take that little step. You're gonna sign up for this group. You're going to
I'm going to work with a coach. I'm going to go to a therapist. I'm going to take a course, read a book.
Yeah, you're gonna raise your hand. And does anybody disagree? And you're gonna be like, there's a sense of risk.
Okay.
There's a sense of unknown. Well, it's all unknown.
So moving into the unknown.
Yeah, you're throwing hope, seeing what sticks, if anything.
Okay.
But there's a risk there, and there's responsibilities that may emerge. But also in the unknown risk, much scarier is what's at stake. What might be a loss that you're unaware of? That what's at risk of being lost, and what are the costs that are also unknown? And as we all know, the unknown is inherently terrifying. We project all kinds of nonsense. Oh, I got this lump on my neck. I don't know what it is. And then like 3 months later, you're like, oh, good, it's cancer. It's like, what do you mean good? Well, so at least I know what it is. I can work with the known, as bad as it may be, rather than all the possibilities of unknowns. I listened to an amazing.
That's such a fascinating topic, right? Because it's a little hard to be certain, except for those that have experienced death and come back. And to a person, What do they have? They have no fear of dying.
Yeah, I like those people. I feel better hanging out with them. You know, they're not projecting their nonsense onto me. Number one, their depth of character is exponentially increased when they come back from an NDE.
Yeah. Near-death experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to touch briefly a little bit deeper into that uncertainty. I listened to an amazing podcast recently, Chris Williamson, Modern Wisdom. He had a neuroscientist on, and she was a little bit Aspergery, so I loved her even the more so because she was very insistent on staying on her agenda and some of the things she wanted to mention. But one of the things she shared is that, and she did a lot of brain science and metabolic reaction in the sense of like what's happening in your body as a result of what's happening in your brain. And she talked about our brain is very much focused on predicting the future and making sure we are alive in it. That's what it's doing all the time, all the time. So whenever things get a little bit unknown, you have metabolic arousal. Your body kind of activates, like there's rustling in the bushes. Is it a bird or is it a lion? Well, I don't know. So we're going to opt for maybe lion and activate. And so if it is a lion, we can do something. If it's a bird, we can then re-regulate rather than like, man, it's probably nothing. Chomp. There you go. You know?
Right.
So what happens, especially in our modern world where there's just so much uncertainty, we live in a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. There's no certainty. Like the government shut down right now when we're recording this. Who knows when it's going to reopen? What's going on in Ukraine? What's going on in China? What's going on anywhere, everywhere? What's going on? There's so much uncertainty. And what that does is it activates us on a very basic metabolic level. Our system is metabolically aroused. And what happens is we label that. Oh, I'm anxious. And if you're anxious, you start looking, what's making me anxious? And let me start doing stuff. I mean, when I get anxious for reasons I'm unaware of, I just start cleaning. Like that's my go-to way to impose some sort of constructive control on my environment when I don't know what it is. So I'm just going to start like, I see myself putting stuff away and dusting and whatever. But we go into this.
So I should invite you to stay with me as a house guest and then really work to make you as anxious as
Yeah, just start like provoking my anxiety, moving stuff around, like rattling doors and chains. And
I'm having David over. Look at my house; it's spotless.
Yeah, but like, it's good, man. It's good. You know, I mean that's why people like on certain types of meth. They're all activated and they don't know what to do with the energy. So they end up becoming like fantastic arrowhead collectors out in the desert because it's something you can do constructively. Yeah. If you go out to like Arizona or New Mexico, if anybody has a massive arrowhead collection, you better check their bathroom. They might have a meth pipe in there. It's a good use of time when you're all cracked out like that. But the point is, if you don't know you're just uncertain, then you start labeling all these things. Am I anxious? And you see people like, oh, you can relabel your anxiety. You're not anxious. You're excited. It's like, no, I'm anxious. I'm not excited. I don't enjoy this. Or when somebody's getting ready to go on a roller coaster, they don't know what's going to happen. So they're metabolically aroused. And so they imagine that maybe they're scared. Well, maybe, but maybe you are anxious. Like what's really happening here and what's going on? And what was so helpful for me in listening to that is that, oh, I'm able to relate much differently from knowing that this metabolic arousal is just because I'm uncertain about all these different questions that are sort of looming in my life. Then I am anxious about legitimate concerns about what actually might happen with these unknowns. So it's not that there's a legitimate worry. It's just that I'm uncertain. And there's a great phrase she used about when she was getting ready to like test for her black belt and her instructor walked over and said, hey, get your butterflies in formation. And she was like, yes, it would be pointless to tell me not to be nervous. Of course, I'm metabolically aroused. I'm getting ready to go and test for my black belt. If I'm not metabolically aroused, that's unhealthy. You should be in performance ready mode. And so what do you do with your butterflies? You just get them in formation. And she said it changed her life. It's such a constructive phrase to use. Yeah. And I use that all the time with myself now that I feel like some degree of anxiety. I'm like, oh, the butterflies are here. I'm not going to wish them away. I can just ask them to get in formation so I can be constructively functional in this situation that's coming up.
Yeah, I saw years ago, I saw a guy named Andrew Holacek, who teaches Vajrayana, dream yoga and stuff. It was a big conference, 150, 200 people, and a young woman went to ask a question and they gave her the mic and she was literally like, trembling and voice was really unsure. And he said, "Hey, just like, hang on. Just notice that all this is energy in the body. It's completely neutral, right? And all you have to do is open to it and harness it." And she was like, you just 100, 200 people watched her just sort of, and then she gave this whatever her question was, but you could just tell the nervousness didn't have her anymore. She had it.
She attuned and was able to operate from attunement rather than from that sort of like dysregulated
Right.
inner conflict of what's going on here. The power of attunement. She aligned, she attuned, then aligned, and then she probably asked a much better question than what she was trying to like hold on to in the moment that she raised her hand and stood up. I'm sure because she was speaking from an inner alignment. Yeah, well, that's a great example. That's perfect. Okay, so back to growth. So that's what's at stake with growth. The risks, the unknown, what's to be gained, what's to be lost. There's a lot of concern there. And we'll circle back later with the developmentally informed perspective, we can help our clients by bringing more awareness of where they are, where is their amoeba on the developmental curve, what's going on with their ship, where are their lagging anchors, where can they perhaps aim their grappling hooks to find more opportunities for traction.
Okay.
And then when they get them there, what would be a helpful amount of tension to hold to move the ship forward slowly but steadily versus other stances in relation to having these handholds or these grappling hooks anchored into the future.
Okay.
So
you want
pause
to
there.
Depth?
Depth is where it all comes together because we talked about the past and the future, but they are never present. Presence is where this is the arena we have to work with. You and I talked about this in our last call, Finding Wholeness in a Divided World. The present is where it all comes together. And so
That's all we got.
right? I mean, that's the gift, right? There, we can all again, this is where all the spiritual traditions, the meditative traditions, the contemplative traditions, modern wisdom stripped of its, woo.
And modern science,
Yes.
cutting edge science, right? It's like, oh, time is a construct, right? It's like, and modern physicists will tell you that like we don't understand time at all. It doesn't appear to be real in any sense.
And yet here we are.
And yet here we are.
I'm watching the timer click on our live
Right.
video
How do we
here.
resolve this paradox? And there is a resolution for that paradox, but that's a completely different.
Yeah, I'm going to turn that part over to you.
But there is it actually isn't a paradox from a certain perspective at all. Anyway, go into the depth thing.
Yeah, well, I will talk from the pre-paradox resolution space that I inhabit, where the present is very active. There's a lot of stuff here. Again, the challenge in focusing in the present is distraction. We talked about the lack of awareness is the fundamental challenge when we're engaging the past. We talked about the unknown is the fundamental challenge when confronting the future. But distraction is our biggest enemy here in the present. And you and I, again, we talked a lot about this in our last conversation about attention and supernormal stimuli and the internet mediated false positives of, false porn, false relationships, false connection, false everything that you're sitting by yourself staring at your screen. That's all both an evolutionary dead end, but it's also a developmental dead end. You are not growing if you are maintaining these false mediated things of relationship that are so central to our reality as humans. Our identity is not just, well, I'm going to do a quick sidebar. So our identity, as we talked about with health and IFS, our identity is an intrapersonal relationships, intrapersonal, how the various parts of ourselves relate and what emerges. And we don't need to use only an IFS lens. We can use gut brain, heart brain, head brain. We can use limbic system, reptile brain, mammalian brain, but we are a composite, and the intrapersonal dynamics of our composite parts is what leads to our emergent sense of identity. And as you and I talked about one of our previous structure content fallacy conversations, that identity itself is situationally mediated by the culture we're born into. I speak English because I was born here. You might speak Spanish if you're born someplace else. Everything I believe, my worldview and my place in it is culturally mediated. So our identity is interpersonal, it's mediated, And it's also interpersonal. I am a different person here with you than I am when I'm coaching my son's flag football team on Saturday. And as I would be if I were sitting darshan with somebody with a really big hat in a monastery in Tibet. Like they're evoking different aspects or different facets of my total being depending on contextually relevant demands and requests, you know? So this present, again, getting back to the part here, what is happening here and how are we engaging with the present? How much of our intrapersonal self is in alignment that's here? What are we doing to cultivate a greater coherence of our intrapersonal identity? What does that look like in our community of the adequate around us? What are we doing here together to deepen our character, to practice our virtues? I mean, one of the places you and I were able to connect most deeply in the past was our shared Shambhala Center Thursday evenings back in Philly. We'd go to the Shambhala Center. We would
Every Thursday night, yeah.
Yeah, we would sit in meditation. With a few other friends of ours, we'd go grab a bite to eat afterwards. We'd talk about what we've been reading, what was inspiring us, where we were stuck. And it was a beautiful, localized concretion of a tribe that largely is still functional today in the ether, but with many of four of us are still connected to some degree, primarily based on the investments we were doing in that place and then similar places elsewhere and across time where that we were coming together with intention on being a better person. So that's
on creating greater depth, both for ourselves and with each other and with the culture at large, all the ways that you talked about.
Exactly. And we were directly countering distraction with an intentional meditative practice.
Okay. That brings it home. Okay. Thank you. So one of the counterweights to distraction, which God knows we are all under assault, right?
Constantly.
With distraction. Yeah. I mean, I'm really disciplined with this thing, right? And it's like, but my ability to concentrate is half of what it was. You know, it's a constant practice now. And my meditations are harder. My Qigong practices are harder. You know, it's like because there's this dopamine machine right here that makes it very easy to not be present.
Yeah. I mean, billions and billions of dollars, channeling Carl Sagan plus capitalism, have been aimed at keeping you more interested in that little shiny black box than the entire world around you and everybody else. Billions. I mean, hundreds of billions, probably trillions at this point. It's all perfect. It's all a supernormal stimuli slot machine. Every time you pull the handle, jackpot, baby. You know, whether it's, you know, especially the AI stuff on there. There's all these like fake eye videos of like porcupines like throwing spikes in people's faces, or like neighborhood cats saving the baby from a tiger. I'm like, I can see an oak tree. There's no tigers in oak trees. This is AI. This is not real.
I'll say I've seen about 20 videos now of cats supposedly driving off bears. Where I'm like, you know, that's like the 20th video that's come across my feed. I'm pretty sure that maybe happened once at some point. You know, I'm pretty sure it's not happening every other Tuesday.
Yeah, I would like to see the use of Sora and AI cat saving people. Those two curves put together. I mean, causation and correlation. However, if I walk in the door wet, you're probably going to say it's raining outside. You know, it's like correlation. Yeah, that's causation, man. So anyway, back to depth. So one of the biggest challenges in our modern culture, again, kind of looping back to one of the places we started, is there's not really any obvious meaning. We're back to the nihilism, the solipsism, the narcissism, the hedonism. There's no meaning there. There's no purpose. There's no depth. There's no quality there. It's just more. How many likes did you get? How many people on your Tinder? How many, rather than what's the quality of them? And John Vervaeke has this great thing. He has a 50-hour YouTube class. He's a neuroscientist, cognitive behaviorist, and Buddhist at the University of Toronto, called Waking Up in the Meaning Crisis. And he has this great example. He asked, and he's a professor, so he actually has live students. He's like, where do you go for information? And what do? They all hold up their little shiny black box of a telephone. He's like, where do you go for knowledge? And again, a lot of phones, a few people will say, oh, the news or the library or, you know, this class. They're trying to get extra brownie points.
I know where you're going to go.
Yep. Where do you go for wisdom?
Ding, ding, ding.
And not only do they have nowhere to go, they don't even know that is probably something that they should be doing, could have been doing. and would likely be, again, much better people had they had a wisdom practice or a wisdom pursuit.
Yeah, man. So like, I mean, you and I talked about this, like into our 20s, I remember, because that's one of the things, one of the reasons we were going to the Shambhala Center to begin with. One of the reasons that we began reading Ken Wilber in the 90s, right, was that we both realized, and David Zeitler, our other friend who was really deeply involved in this inquiry, but it was like we realized that we came not just from homes where there was no wisdom. Like you and I used to joke that like our parents have no wisdom to offer at all.
Right, right.
I mean, they kind of had knowledge. They had information. Not knowledge is a little iffy, but wisdom. And it was like, and then like our professors didn't really seem to hold any wisdom. They had knowledge around their field, but then
And the few that did were like magnetically attractive.
absolutely. I mean, you were drawn to them, right? It's like I remember when I first saw Lama Tsering Everest, a Dzogchen teacher in the 90s, and I saw her walk into the fucking room. And just watching her, I was like, that woman has something I've never seen before in my entire life. I don't know what it is, but it's different than everybody else everywhere that I've seen over my 24 years or 23 years. What did she have? She had wisdom. And that wisdom came out of her pores.
Her embodied presence was one of deep alignment. That's the power that's available to all of us as we attune. We get some attunement goals. We start practicing in these 3 dimensions of access, temporally speaking,
Of health,
healing,
depth, and growth.
health, depth, and growth. And as we practice, as we implement these practices for better attunement in these 3 dimensions of temporality, we can create an alignment, and that alignment is powered by the engine of adult developmental theory, by the natural eros of what does it mean to grow and mature as a human.
Okay.
That is universe given, God given, it's the oak that's in the acorn. That is there. That latent potential is there. And when we're distracted and we're fearful and we're just lacking awareness of what our own baggage is, we're not really growing, right? That's like throwing an acorn on the sidewalk and being like, well, why isn't it growing? It's like, well, this is not a conducive environment for that,
Yeah, I mean, well, my Zen teacher, Junpa Roshi, he used to say, and he would have tears in his eyes when he would say it, but he would say, you have this one precious human life. Do not hesitate to awaken. What are you waiting for? You can be liberated, and you're going to sit there and be on your phone. You're going to fuck off on Instagram. You're going to fuck off watching porn. Okay, but you have an opportunity in this realm, in this life, in this body. You have an opportunity to not just find wisdom, but to become wisdom.
Yeah, embodied, like the Lama you mentioned.
Yeah.
She walked in the room, and because you were in this growth mindset, like
Right.
you noticed, you felt it, and you were attracted correctly to that is better. This is
right.
better.
It is better. It's
Yes.
not. There's no asterisks by that. It's better for some people. It's like no, it's better. It's better to be a carrier of wisdom because it means that you have done these things that you're speaking about, right? Health, depth, growth. Those things are all alive. You are living in an attunement culture of some sort, no matter if it's amber or orange or green, or none of that even matters, right? Because
Exactly.
the attunement culture,
Exactly.
at whatever developmental level it's operating from, is a better culture than an attainment culture.
Absolutely.
As far as wisdom goes, now you need an attainment culture sometimes to make sure that you survive the winter. Like we don't want to just throw that one out the window, right? It's like, yeah, like what are we doing to make sure that when winter hits, we have enough food to survive? That's also kind of
Yeah.
important.
There's a
you
big
know?
and there. Yeah.
Big you and I have both done a lot of polarity work. So what I'm saying is this exists inside of a polarity, not a binary. And we're not saying that, oh, you should go and just be attunement. No, you should also make sure you're paying your bills, that you have a retirement set up, that you're responsibly managing the X, Y's, and Z's, right? All these things matter in this living polarity, but we're all squashed against the attainment side culturally and individually. And it's leading to a lot of the pain that we're seeing and experiencing firsthand everywhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, this is where I like the fruits of the spirit. I'm going to read you the 9 virtues here. And then I'll ask everybody, myself and you included, how are you seeing these manifest by you in your life and positively affecting you and all the relationships around you. And I'm speaking to CEOs right now here. I'm speaking to teenagers and everybody in between. Where are you seeing love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control? They will be judged by their fruits. These are the fruits of the Spirit that will, much like an apple tree will spontaneously produce apples given the right environment. These are the fruits of Spirit this is our potential. This is what we can express.
Say one more time, just a little slower. Give
Sure.
each one a minute to
Okay.
land.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna marinate in this for a second. Fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, not happiness. Notice joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control.
All right, it's Lance. It's beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, these are timeless. This isn't me making up shit. This is fruits of the Spirit. This is what all the traditions from which modernity sprang were very intentional about cultivating, in spite of the social caste nonsense and
Right.
plagues and whatever. So we want to preserve. This is the soil we want to preserve. This is not dirt.
Right. And I can speak from, I mean, the reason I'm getting a little emotional here is because I have so much of those things in my life. Like, I'm filthy rich with them, and there's so much gratitude, and part of that is because I've set out to have these things because they matter, and the quality of your lived experience day to day can be so beautiful, but it's not going to happen to you, and it's not going to be given to you. You have to claim it.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned gratitude, because there's a couple phrases I want to share here with us, Keith. And I deeply appreciate you sharing, the depth of your feeling into those, because that's the proper response to being shown the fruits of the Spirit, is to be moved.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, you've known me a long time. It's been a long process of me showing any emotion, much less showing emotion publicly.
Yeah, and I want to commend you for it. There's a growth edge there of leaning into that you're fully doing here, and it should be acknowledged, appreciated, and witnessed. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, the gratitude and the thank you is a nice pivot back to gratitude, because we've talked about, we alluded to the grievance culture earlier, and the victim Olympics of who's most.
The oppression Olympics. Yeah.
Yeah, you've addressed this very skillfully and wisely in your DEI talks, so I won't do a worse job here. So I'll just acknowledge that and say, go look at that if you want to hear about it. But we want to move out of the grievance culture and back into a culture of greatness and inner greatness, not accumulated greatness. And gratitude is one of the key levers that move us out of grievance and allow us to be open and curious and bring some wonder into our place in the world, this one precious life that you mentioned.
Right.
And aspire for some greatness, and not just as not looking at glory or pride, but greatness and character and dignity and virtue and these fruits of the Spirit. Be known for being great in your kindness, not great in your likes or whatever,
Well, for everyone listening here, watching here, the thing that I've done over the last, 2 years or so, but every day, and I'm a Zen priest, so I meditate every day, but whether you meditate or not, you could set a timer. You could just do this practice, which I spend the last 2 minutes of every meditation practice that I do, with no exceptions. Timer gets to 2 minutes, a little bell goes off, and then I spend the next 2 minutes thinking all the things I'm grateful for. And it's like, right now I'm looking at this beautiful blue sky and trees are changing, for the weather, for my dog, for my friends, for my partner, I have a cool car. It's like, I mean, I literally like I think of everything, and the list is so long that I never get to it all in 2 minutes, And when I first started doing the practice, I could think of 4 or 5 things. And now it's, it's 100 things, it's 120 things, to even to like, I got a cool shirt on. I really like this shirt. I'm grateful for that. So it can become sort of an infinite thing. And then that practice just bleeds into everything you do. Everything you do.
Absolutely. That's the alignment. When you walk into a room resonating from your gratitude practice, you walk in much more like Lama Tsering than the Keith who would have shown up having not done the gratitude practice and been sort of like frazzled and maybe a little bit,
Pissed off.
yeah,
Just generally
like
pissed off.
overly purposeful,
Purposeful. I want, before we get into sort of beginning to wrap things up here and give him more of an overview, Jerry asked a question here, which is a good question. He said, why does the Attainment Society deny the reality of the Attunement Society, but the Attunement Society accepts the importance of the attainment one?
Well, simply the Attainment Society cannot see attunement. It's in the interior. It's a qualitative state. It would be like I don't drink wine. I don't drink anything anymore, actually. And another time, Keith will tell you all the reasons why that's a good idea. But if you were to give me some really fancy wine, Opus One, and some sort of swill, and like, can't you see the qualitative differences? No, it's red and it's warm. Maybe something, but I don't have the eyes to see, and I don't have the palate to taste the qualitative distinctions that are obvious to somebody who's spent time attuning their taste buds to the qualitative differences available from these different types of grapes and regions and vintages and all that other stuff that I'm told is significant,
Yeah, man. So maybe this is how we can sort of patch it together here, which is that like, we're really talking about, we're speaking to people who understand, who this resonates with, what attunement is, right? They're going to feel the resonance. If they're on Integral Life or watching this talk, they're already aligned with that in some way. So this all is going to make sense. But as we take this and we look out at the world and we say, hey, how can we better serve what's going on here? How can we bring more harmony and health and dignity, right? Like, how can we help spread those things? And how do we do that when we're interacting with a culture that's mostly stuck at attainment and we're working with people, to your point, that can't see these interiors? How do we bridge that gap, especially as developmentalists?
I mean, that's the $1 million question, right? Or I guess in today's
that's why
economy,
I asked
it's the $10 million question.
Otherwise, we're back to the now late John Searle's wonderful, wonderful question. So what?
Right. So there's a great Rumi quote, which I'm going to get slightly wrong because I don't have it written down. It was, yesterday, I wanted to change the world. Today, I am wise, and I will change myself. And so if you want to be more effective as a change agent in the world, in implementing or working for the things you want to work for, then the inner attunement is going to allow you to be more effective. As Keith mentioned with Lama Tsering, she walked into the room and the room changed.
I mean, and not everybody saw it, right? Obviously.
Right, because they were out of attune with themselves and with the vibration that she was emanating, or the, getting a little bit woo here. So I would say, I mentioned, pivoting internally, there's an opportunity for you, me, everybody here. Where are you operating from a grievance culture mindset? Not you're subscribing to it entirely, but where are you feeling aggrieved?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then how can you shift through gratitude practices over to a more aspirational greatness culture? And that internal shift will stabilize your own field, which will create peace. Peace generates order, where fear creates distortion. So you will be more effective at everything you do.
Okay. And I'm going to interrupt you because I think, as an example, for the many people listening, many people that I love and are close to who are incensed about what's happening with Trump, what I'm hearing you saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the way to change, the way to quote unquote fight back, is to take that Martin Luther King approach, which is, I mean, how fucking effective was he at fighting back? I mean, creating change in a very short window of time. And how did he do it? What I'm hearing you say is he did it by doing all these things that we're talking about. He was the thing that he believed we needed to be. He wasn't going, fuck you, Whitey. We're going to tear it all fucking down. And you're wrong and you're racist and that wasn't his message, right? Mm-hmm. If that was his message, it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah, I mean, he realized that the power, and as do many of us, all of the people we admire in history for being change agents, that
And as opposed to conquerors, yeah.
right, yeah, exactly. Genghis Khan he was a change agent, that's for sure. But the ones we admire for their character are the ones who cultivate that character. You know, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was Reverend Doctor. He was a spiritual leader and had spent years cultivating the inner depth, the character that allowed him to march so confidently from the Selma Bridge, which I'm here in Montgomery, Alabama, to here. This is where all that went down with Rosa Parks. That all happened here in Montgomery.
Yeah. It
To
didn't seem like he took anything personally.
Of course not. What's personal when you're operating out of that degree of alignment? You are a human with dignity, working with other humans with dignity, seeking to inspire and elevate the entire situation.
Boy,
Pardon me.
I mean, what a challenge, right? For so many of us. It's like it's the quote that Gandhi never said, but be the change you want to see in the
Right,
world, which
right.
is hilariously, he actually never said that. But so I don't know who actually said it. Maybe like it was, Kip out of St. Paul, was the one that actually said that, talking about his restaurant supply business. I don't know, but
Yeah, but long time listener, first time caller. This worked for me. Well, so see, I'm glad you mentioned Kip, because that's a good
I'm glad I mentioned Kip.
a good metaphor to switch gears here, because like one of all things we're talking about have been how to be a better person, and then what do you do? Well, go be a better person. So that's really not pragmatically effective today. What can I do today?
Right.
Well, I can try being a better person. So I'm going to meditate for 3 minutes after this call, and then I'm going to go pick up the dog poop in the backyard, and those are little things that make me a better person. But that's like not having an impact.
But distraction, it seems like to me, the one thing you said, if I was to focus in on something that I would say, ooh, what I'm going to walk away from this call on is to be more mindful of when I'm distracted. Doesn't mean I'm not going to be distracted, but it's like, I know the places that I'll go today where I will choose to be distracted, and maybe I will choose them. But it's the idea of there will be a different volitional awareness today than there was this morning.
Keith, I'm glad you mentioned that, because as I alluded to earlier, working with the Stagen Leadership Academy, what we do here in like basically Leadership 101 is we talk about attention management. We have a great core practice, the attention management core practices, and there's a little diagram that has, are we in our proactive zone, reactive zone, waste or distraction? And the very first thing we do with our clients is help them be more aware of where is their attention.
That's right.
Are they distracted? Are they in the waste zone? And then the question is, what can we do what is one small shift we can do to be less reactive and more proactive? And that's like some of the very first practices we do there. So I'm glad because that's available to all of us at any time.
And where else are you going to begin if you don't have some sense of sovereign autonomy over your attention? This is Zen 101, right? It's like, what is meditation? Meditation, Junpo, my teacher, he used to say, look, Zen is dog training. It's literally, what are you doing? You're just training the dog.
The little puppy of your attention. Yeah.
Sit. Well, what does that mean? It means you're training your attention. Where do you put your attention? I'm thinking about all these things. Oh, just come back to the breath, or come back to a koan, right? Or come back to looking or listening to
the
something.
present.
Come back to putting the attention on something, and then allowing everything else to arise. And that's meditation 101, right? That's the beginning of wisdom. There is no wisdom without that.
Absolutely. And I would add, when we're looking at what's also something we can do that's easier and accessible to all of us, getting back to a culture of dignity, what does dignity do? It acknowledges our shared humanity. And, the dignity culture, it celebrates those bonds of our shared humanity and human connection. If you have dignity, belonging, and safety, those come from relational connections, whether it's just you and your partner, you and several people in your friend group, or you in a larger thing. What activates that and empowers it? Collective things. Look, again, Jamie Wheel's got all kinds of great things. Like, look what people have done forever to organize: arts, dance, music, ritual. We're all here together. We're creating a vibe of a shared humanity. And wherever there's going to be shared positivity, evolution is happening there. That's where evolution is happening. Jamie Wheels shared a recent 20-minute video of John Mayer, who's got his own Grateful Dead cover band,
Right.
playing like a jam session. And he's like, look, everywhere the camera goes, people are smiling and they're all in rhythm. Like this is a harmonic resonance activation that everybody who's there right now is walking away a slightly better person because of the droplet of evolutionary growth that happened that was supported by their collective harmonics.
And their cannabis, but yes.
I mean, a little fuel on the fire every now and then. So I have a couple things I want to wrap up here with, and then I'm done with the points I wanted to make. So, human connection, and that shared humanity, the dignity culture. You have the triad of dignity. Belonging, safety, and dignity. That's our human birthright. And any place that acknowledges and supports those three things is going to be better than places that don't. Something I really want to lean into here, and you and I both appreciate, is the power of humor. Humor is amazingly transformative.
Oh my! Again, Junpo, he said, if you've lost your sense of humor, you've lost your way.
Right. Absolutely. And we mentioned fundamentalism, especially across different value stacks. We kind of alluded to that based on we touched upon that. We spent 2 talks getting into what does that look like, the structure content fallacy. And fundamentalism can occur as a mindset operating, whether you're a traditionalist, a modern, a progressive, or whatever. And what do all these fundamentalist ideological Puritans hate? They hate humor. Everything's serious all the time. They don't like jokes. They don't like sarcasm. They don't like wit. They definitely don't like satire, especially make fun of their big hats. So humor, get together with your friends and laugh. If you're spending time with your friends laughing,
especially at yourselves,
absolutely, and each other and at yourselves. So that's that. Again, these are what we can do. Like today, we can meditate to get some increased coherence. We can be with people that we care about. We can grant them the dignity triad, or the triad of dignity, belonging, and safety.
And dignity, yeah.
And then, again, we talked already about the greatness culture versus grieving culture. You can create a micro greatness culture like Keith and I talked about in our little Shambhala Thursday night study groups. That was a greatness culture.
And it had 3 people in it usually.
Yeah. That's what's in it's a great religious Christian tradition where 2 or more are gathered in my name. Yeah. That's all it takes. Final 2 points. You talked about this already. Entertainment culture versus enrichment. What are you doing with your time? Are you entertaining yourself or are you enriching yourself? And if you're really aspirational, you can take that enrichment and switch over to enlightenment, but just enrichment. That's like always valuable to spend time in contemplation, always valuable to look for places to be inspired, to be elevated, to feel called forth, to express a higher octave of human beneficence through these virtues of the spirit. And then the last thing I'll mention, when you're looking to form these newer relationships, these newer groups, these intentional groups outside of affiliation, orient to values over lessons, orient to principles over parties, orient to vision, not victimhood, and make your own tribe of the chosen that you're putting together rather than imagining you're in a tribe of the chosen ones based on your political affiliation, your culture, your religious traditions, whatever. So there's a lot of intentionality here. That's what that growth, those grappling hooks, throw them in these directions and you're going to be able to get a lot more traction, while you also seek to identify through awareness where your developmental anchors, your lagging anchors may be, and deepen all of that through this present moment.
Beautiful. I mean, that's quite a gamut, and so, yeah, I have to say I did deliver on this being a little bit beyond politics. This is a conversation that takes us beyond the the live wire of what it feels like to be alive today with everyone. So many of us, feeling, almost histrionic about where we're going. And so I love this, David. It's there's a lot of meat in this talk, just, the belonging, safety, dignity, attainment versus attunement, all of these things, health, depth, and growth, looking at the past and the future, recovering the past and the higher potential of the future, and then, being mindful of distractions in the present. It's a really beautiful, comprehensive overview of what we can do in our microcosms to begin to create the kind of culture like Dr. King that is actually may help change the world, not by trying to change the world, but by trying to be the thing that we think the world needs to be. So there's a humility in that, right?
Absolutely.
And there's work in that. Rather than I'm going to go change you, you fucking jerk. It's like I'm going to change me. And so it just so lines up with how I orient towards the world. And yeah, just a beautiful talk. So if people want to know more about you or this kind of work, or more about working with you, where would they go to get more information?
They can go a couple different places depending on particular niche of interest. If they're coming from the men's work side, they can contact me via my Welcome to Fatherhood portal, where I talk about men's work, relationships, and parenting. If they're looking for individual leadership support, they can contact me through my Catalyst for Change portal, where I do a lot of my individual coaching. And then if they're looking for larger organizational support, they can contact me through our Stagen portal, all of which the links I will provide for you to put in your show notes.
Great, man. Well, really appreciate the talk. It was great chatting with you again. Great seeing you again. And a big shout out to Corey and Rob at Integral Life for hosting this thing and making it all happen, and to all of you for watching and listening. And hope this talk was of service. And if you see it on YouTube or wherever you see it, feel free to post comments and things like that, and we can stay in dialogue about this. So